In 2018, 21-year-old Grace Millane decided to take a gap year after graduating from college. The young British woman planned to travel the world, and she set off on a backpacking tour that fall. After spending 6 weeks in South America, she flew to New Zealand for a 2-week stay. Millane was looking forward to celebrating her 22nd birthday while she was there. But tragically, she never got the opportunity. On December 2nd, Millane's parents sent her birthday wishes, but she never responded. They grew concerned, and 3 days later, they reported her missing. Police in Auckland soon discovered that she wasn't just missing. She was dead. In less than a week, they identified her killer as Jesse Kempson, a 26-year-old man with a history of violence against women. Millane had met up with Kempson the night of December 1st for a date after connecting with him on Tinder. And before Grace Millane ever received her parents' birthday message, Kempson had strangled her to death in his hotel room. After graduating from England's University of Lincoln with a bachelor's degree in advertising and marketing, Grace Millane decided to explore the world. The young British backpacker arrived in New Zealand after spending 6 weeks in South America, eager to begin the next leg of her adventure. Her parents stated in 2018 that throughout her trip, Millane had been bombarding us with numerous photographs and messages of her adventures. That all stopped on December 2nd, Grace Millane's 22nd birthday. 3 days later, on December 5th, 2018, Millane's parents reported her missing. While police in Auckland initially believed there was insufficient evidence to say anything had happened to Millane, it only took a few days before they determined that she was no longer alive. On December 8th, police officially announced that Grace Millane's case was being treated as a homicide investigation, and they began to retrace her final steps. Security camera footage helped them follow her movements on the night of her murder. Security cameras from local restaurants and a hotel in Auckland painted a clear and chilling picture of her final hours. Millane was seen having drinks with a male companion at 3 different locations throughout the evening, and at 9:41 p.m., a camera captured her and the same man in an elevator at a hotel called City Life. Investigators later learned she had met this man on Tinder, and they knew exactly who he was, because he had commented on one of her Facebook photos the very night he killed her. Jesse Shane Kempson was a 26-year-old bartender and laborer. On Facebook, he dropped his surname, going simply by Jesse Shane. When police saw that he had left a comment on Millane's page the night of December 1st, they reached out via social media to request an interview with him. In that first interview, Kempson appeared to be well-mannered, cooperative, and willing to talk. He told police that they'd gone out on a date the night of December 1st, but that they had parted ways around 10 p.m. And he hadn't seen her since.
Tell us about Grace.
So I was talking to Grace on Tinder.
Yeah.
We'd matched on Friday. I saw that we'd matched the next day on Saturday. And then we met at Sky City, and then we decided that we were going up to Andy's Burger Bar, which is on the first floor.
Whose idea was it to go to that particular burger place?
Me, because I didn't initially know that she was real.
What do you mean?
Well, there's a lot of... So have you heard of catfish?
No.
So catfishing is where someone uses your profile or uses your photos and pretends to be you and then meets and you're a completely different person.
Right.
And it's on Tinder, it's all about the way you look. And so if they use more endearing photos, you're more likely to swipe for them.
Okay.
Yeah.
How does meeting in a public place sort of protect you from meeting someone who's not as good looking as...
Well, there's security there. So if she wasn't who she said she was,
yeah.
At least in my mind I'd feel safe.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's us.
down there?
Yep.
Is that before or after?
That is after.
Okay, and where are you guys going now?
So she's going that way, and I'm going across the street.
Where do you walk?
I go down Queen Street. No, I go down Victoria Street, straight down to the bottom, and then hang a left, and I head towards the viaduct.
You go to the viaduct a bit?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
You've kind of walked in a bit of a funny direction if you were planning to go to the viaduct.
Well, it's the direction I normally go.
Yeah. It's I mean, I'm just sort of saying, like, if you were planning to go to the viaduct.
I normally go down Queen Street and then cross at the bottom of Queen Street, go through the containers, and then walk along the wharf.
Yeah. Is there a particular reason you were going to do that?
I feel safer down that way. I don't know, it's a lot safer for me to be walking down that way than walking down the back streets.
Okay.
However, police had already viewed the CCTV footage, and they knew Kempson and Millane had taken the elevator to the 3rd floor of City Life. Kempson was seen leaving the following morning, but Millane never appeared on the cameras again. Kempson was clearly lying to the police, and he had just gone from a person of interest to the lead suspect in Grace Millane's murder. He was taken into custody on December 8th. The following day, Millane's body was discovered in the mountains about 12 miles outside of Auckland. As police found Millane's body, viewed her autopsy report, and continued to speak with Jesse Kempson, they began unraveling the mystery of her death. After Kempson and Millane's date on December 1st, they had returned to his hotel room at City Life. There, Kempson claimed, Millane asked him for rough sex, and he had accidentally killed her while consensually choking her. However, his actions in the hours and days that followed painted a completely different picture. According to reports, at 1:30 a.m., Kempson searched online for things like hottest fire and flesh-eating birds, visited a porn website, and took 7 photos of Millane's dead body, moving her limbs into various poses. The next morning, he messaged another woman on Tinder to schedule a date. When he met up with her that afternoon, he told her a bizarre story about a man who had asked his girlfriend to have rough sex and then accidentally killed her. That same day, Kempson rented a carpet cleaner and bought a suitcase. Less than 24 hours after murdering Millane, he smuggled her body down the elevator and out of the hotel in the newly purchased bag. Then, on the morning of December 3rd, Kempson left City Life at 6:15 a.m., stopped at a store to purchase a shovel, and buried Grace Millane in the Waitakere Ranges. Kempson's argument that an accident during rough sex led to Millane's death didn't carry much weight. He was found guilty of her murder and sentenced to life in prison with the possibility of parole after 17 years. In 2020, Dr. Simon Stables testified at the trial that Kempson would have had to apply significant pressure to Millane's neck for at least 4 to 5 minutes in order to kill her, which wouldn't happen accidentally. What's more, Kempson had committed violent sexual crimes before. Just 8 months before murdering Grace Millane, he had raped another British tourist he met on Tinder in his motel room after a date. She didn't tell anyone about the assault until she recognized Kempson in media coverage of his trial for Millane's death. "Every time I went to sleep," the woman later told Kempson during a separate trial in which he was found guilty of raping her, "I'd see your eyes popping out of your head, staring at me in anger." Several other women also came forward with troubling stories about Kempson's behavior. He had told one of them that he liked feet, dominating, and strangulation, because it made him feel more superior and in control. And in a third trial, Kempson was convicted yet again, this time for assaulting his former girlfriend, while they were living together. He'd threatened her with a knife and forced her to participate in sex acts she was not comfortable with. Though Grace Millane was one of many women Jesse Kempson harmed, she tragically didn't survive to tell her story. The truth of what exactly happened in that hotel room on December 1st, 2018, may never come out, but for now, Kempson is unable to add to his long list of victims. After Nicole Van Den Hurk's 1995 murder case went largely ignored for more than 20 years, stepbrother Andy Van Den Hurk did the only thing he could think of to get the police to re-examine the matter with a DNA test. He falsely confessed to her murder. In 1995, Nicole Van Den Hurk was a 15-year-old student who was staying with her grandmother in Eindhoven, Netherlands. On October 6th, she left her grandmother's home in the early morning to bike to her job at a nearby shopping center. But she never arrived. Police then began to search for her, and later that evening discovered her bicycle by a nearby river. The search continued over the next several weeks, but the next clue didn't appear until October 19th, when her backpack was found at the Eindhoven Canal. Police continued to search the river, canal, and nearby forests multiple times over the next 3 weeks, but to no avail. On November 22nd, 7 weeks after Van Den Hurk first disappeared, a passerby stumbled on her body in the woods between the two towns of Mierlo and Lerop, not far from her grandmother's home. She had been raped and murdered. Police determined the cause of death was most likely internal bleeding due to a stab wound. The police had few suspects. A local woman named Celine Hartogs initially claimed to know the men involved in Van Den Hurk's murder. She had been detained in Miami for drug trafficking and alleged that the men she had been working for had been involved in the murder. Van Den Hurk's stepfather first supported Hartog's story. But upon further investigation, the police determined that her claims were flawed and unrelated. In the summer of 1996, the authorities briefly arrested the victim's stepfather and stepbrother, Ad and Andy Van Den Hurk, but there was no evidence that linked them to the crime. Both were released and ultimately cleared of all involvement. A reward was offered for any information related to the murder, but that produced no helpful leads. To make matters worse, the number of detectives on the investigation team was cut. Over the next few years, all the leads dried up, and the case went cold. In 2004, a cold case team briefly reopened the case, but once again, failed. By 2011, with no resolution and the investigation stalled, Andy Van Den Hurk had had enough. As stated in a Facebook post from March 8th of that year, Andy Van Den Hurk confessed to killing his stepsister. "I will be arrested today at the murder of my sister. I confessed, we'll get in contact soon." Police promptly arrested him, but found again that there was no evidence other than his own confession that linked him to his stepsister's murder. He was subsequently released after only 5 days in custody. Shortly afterward, he retracted his confession and said that he only confessed in order to draw attention back to his stepsister's case. "I wanted to get her exhumed and get DNA off her. I kind of set myself up and it could have gone horribly wrong. To get her exhumed, I had to put steps in place to get her exhumed. I went to the police and said I did it. She is my sister, absolutely. I miss her every day." Andy's plan worked, however. In September 2011, police dug up Nicole Van Den Hurk's body for DNA testing. After they exhumed the body, police found traces of DNA relating to 3 different men, which were all believed to belong to her stepbrother, her boyfriend at the time of her disappearance, and a 46-year-old former psychiatric patient and convicted rapist named Joss DeG. Charges were officially brought against DG for the rape and murder of Nicole Van Den Hurk in April 2014. However, the defense immediately called into question the DNA evidence and pointed out that there were 2 other men's DNA on the body as well. They also suggested that it was possible that DG and Van Den Hurk had engaged in consensual sex prior to her murder. All of this ultimately led to a lessening of the charges against DG from homicide to manslaughter. The trial dragged on for more than 2 years. Scientists reanalyzed the results to confirm that DNA from the body belonged to DG beyond a reasonable doubt, but there was no way to prove for sure from this DNA alone that DG had been involved in the murder. After 21 years of on and off investigation and almost 2 years in court, DG was acquitted of the murder charge on November 21, 2016. Instead, DG was found guilty of rape and sentenced to 5 years in prison. In October 2015, Sasha Samsudean returned to her apartment building after a night out with friends in Orlando, Florida. Intoxicated and confused trying to find her apartment, Samsudean was assisted by the building's seemingly helpful 24/7 security guard. When Samsudean was found strangled in her bed a few hours later, dedicated homicide investigators followed the trail of video evidence, which led directly to the building security guard, a disturbed man named Stephen Duxbury. This is the disturbing story of Sasha Samsudean's murder. Sasha Samsudean was born in New York on July 4, 1988. Growing up in Orlando, Florida, Samsudean went on to graduate from the University of Florida, working for a real estate company specializing in Orlando apartment rentals, 407apartments.com. The apartment company still contains a past contributor profile of Samsudean, where she is listed as a local expert, describing herself as the Cupid of apartment hunting. In 2015, Samsudean was living at Uptown Place condominiums in Orlando's downtown entertainment district, a secure and modern building with 24/7 security video cameras and digital key codes for each unit. Tragically for Samsudean, these security measures didn't prevent a horrifying threat that came from within. In the early morning hours of October 17, 2015, Samsudean left Orlando's Attic nightclub alone, having been out with a group of friends. Despite not seeing Samsudean again that night, a friend of hers, Anthony Roper, knew he was meeting her for breakfast later that morning. Roper thought it strange later that morning when Samsudean didn't show up for breakfast. Samsudean was an active social media user, but hadn't responded to any form of messaging or phone calls. Later that day, after their repeated calls and messages went unanswered, Roper and 2 other friends headed over to Samsudean's address. They grew increasingly concerned when they noticed a present sitting in her car that she was supposed to have taken to a baby shower that day. When Samsudean, who lived alone, didn't answer her door, Roper called the police requesting a welfare check that evening. Police officers encountered a strong smell of bleach as soon as they walked in, and found Samsudean dead, lying in her bed, wrapped up in her comforter, partially clothed. Samsudean's shirt and bra had been ripped open, with her pants and underwear missing, yet her apartment had shown no signs of forced entry. Samsudean had been strangled, with the medical examiner confirming blunt trauma to her head, and upper and lower abrasions consistent with somebody forcefully restraining her. But try as he might to completely remove evidence using bleach, a male had left traces of himself in Samsudean's apartment. For a start, the toilet seat was up. That was something I would never expect in any apartment or home where only a woman lives, William J., the prosecutor for the state's attorney's office, said. Fingerprints were found underneath the toilet seat lid, and partial shoe prints were located on the floor. When swabs were taken from Samsudean's chest and neck area, they revealed the presence of foreign DNA. With the building's security footage not readily available, homicide investigators spoke with the security guard on duty that night, Stephen Duxbury. The security guard told investigators that he had interacted with Samsudean and 2 other women at the entrance of the building. But Samsudean didn't produce ID or a key card, so he couldn't grant her access. When another resident had arrived, Samsudean followed him inside, and Duxbury claimed to have last seen Samsudean fumbling with the security code outside her apartment. The 2 women who brought Samsudean home were tracked down, telling investigators they were in an Uber that night when they stopped for an intoxicated Samsudean walking along the street. Concerned for her safety, they had Samsudean get in the car and brought her back to her building. After Samsudean had gained access, the women left, rightly assuming Samsudean should have been safe with an overnight security guard present. The man who Samsudean followed in that night was identified through the building's digital key logs, and he was cleared through a DNA swab, telling investigators that Samsudean appeared pretty drunk. An upstairs neighbor then came forward saying she had seen Samsudean in the hallway that night, and she was being followed by the security guard. When investigators reviewed the building's security footage, they observed Duxbury's suspicious behavior, which completely conflicted with his original account. The security footage from 1:46 a.m. shows Samsudean spending her last morning on Earth, wandering the exterior floors and stairways of the building, both trailed, and at times accompanied, by her murderer. Duxbury stalks the floors and staircases close to Samsudean for almost 40 minutes, using his own key through several sealed access doors. Under the veneer of a professional security guard, Duxbury senses opportunity with an intoxicated and vulnerable Samsudean, while well aware that the building's common area hallways are not covered by surveillance cameras. At 6:36 a.m., Duxbury is captured in uniform, carrying white refuse bags with red handles out of a doorway, leading to the second-floor garage, where his car was parked according to court documents. A minute or 2 later, Duxbury is seen walking back into the building without the bags. Having originally told investigators he left work at 6 a.m., garbage collection was not part of security guards' duties at Uptown Place, and the same bags were found in Samsudean's apartment. The digital and physical evidence started implicating Duxbury, as investigators obtained a search warrant for his home and phone. On October 17th at around 5 a.m., technicians found that Duxbury used his smartphone's browser seeking information on how to override a quick-set digital, exactly the type of lock on Samsudean's front door. This coincided with a 90-minute time period where Duxbury was absent from any security video or any other security-related patrol data. Duxbury's fingerprints, provided as a requirement for his employment as a security guard, matched the print on the rim of Samsudean's toilet seat and a thumbprint on her nightstand. DNA found on Samsudean's breast then came back conclusively as Duxbury's, and the soles of some boots Duxbury wore appeared to be a match for shoe prints in the apartment. Agreeing to a polygraph, Duxbury's answers about Samsudean's murder were bald lies, claiming to have never entered or ever been inside Samsudean's apartment. On October 30th, 2015, Stephen Duxbury was arrested and charged with first-degree murder, attempted sexual battery, and burglary. After a 6-day trial, Duxbury was found guilty of all charges on November 21, 2017, receiving 2 life sentences without parole for the first-degree murder of Samsudean, and an additional 15 years for the burglary conviction. Samsudean's parents then filed a lawsuit against the building, the security company, and the lock manufacturer. Duxbury had been hired by Vital Security in 2015, and despite passing the state-level FBI background check, was soon the subject of numerous resident complaints from Uptown Place. Chillingly, in May 2015, A young female resident had reported that Duxbury was acting sketchy after he followed her back to her apartment. The lawsuit laid responsibility with the lack of surveillance video cameras monitoring the common area hallways. This failure created the opportunity for Duxbury to break into Samsudean's apartment while she was asleep without detection or interference. Over a period of 12 days in May 2004, 3 dark green suitcases were discovered in and near the Chesapeake Bay. One contained legs, another a pelvis, and the third a torso and head. The body parts belonged to a New Jersey father of 2 named Bill McGuire, and police soon suspected that his wife, Melanie McGuire, had killed him. The media soon dubbed the case the suitcase murder. For her part, Melanie insisted that her husband had stormed out after a fight. But police soon found that the couple had a deeply unhappy marriage, that Melanie had begun an affair with a co-worker, and that someone in the McGuire's home had searched for things like how to commit murder online. They surmised that Melanie had sedated Bill, shot him, and cut up his body. Though a jury agreed and sentenced Melanie McGuire to life in prison, the so-called suitcase killer has long insisted upon her innocence. She claims that someone went after Bill because of his gambling debts, and that the real perpetrator of the suitcase murder is still out there. Nothing in Melanie McGuire's early life suggested she'd turn to murder. Indeed, she spent most of her time bringing new life into the world. Born on October 8, 1972, Melanie grew up in Ridgewood, New Jersey, majored in statistics at Rutgers University, and enrolled in nursing school. In 1999, she started to work as a nurse at Reproductive Medicine Associates, one of the country's largest fertility clinics. That same year, she married her husband, a U.S. Navy veteran named William Bill McGuire. But though Bill and Melanie had 2 sons together, their marriage swiftly soured. Melanie claimed that Bill had a gambling problem and a volatile temper. Sometimes, she said, he'd get violent with her. That's what happened the night of April 28, 2004, the day Bill McGuire disappeared, according to his wife. Melanie claims that Bill pushed her against the wall during a fight, hit her, and tried to choke her with a dryer sheet. He probably would have broken my cheek if it had been a closed fist, Melanie McGuire stated. He said he was leaving and he wasn't coming back and that I could tell my children they didn't have a father. The very next day, Melanie spoke with divorce attorneys and attempted to file for a restraining order. But she didn't report Bill missing. And about a week later, suitcases containing his body parts began to float to the surface in the Chesapeake Bay. The suitcase murder had come to light. On May 5, 2004, a couple of fishermen and their children noticed a dark green Kenneth Cole suitcase floating in the waters of the Chesapeake Bay. They opened it and found a man's dismembered legs cut off at the knee. On May 11th, another suitcase was discovered, and on May 16th, a third. One contained a torso and a head, the other a man's thighs and pelvis. The victim, a coroner found, had been shot multiple times. According to reports, the police were able to quickly identify the dismembered man. After they released a sketch to the public, one of Bill McGuire's friends soon came forward. I just burst into tears, Melanie said of learning about her husband's death in a 2007 interview. But despite her apparent grief, police soon began to suspect that Melanie McGuire had murdered her husband. They discovered that Melanie had bought a gun in Pennsylvania 2 days before Bill went missing, and that she was having an affair with a doctor at her practice, Bradley Miller. Investigators also found Bill's car where Melanie suggested it would be, Atlantic City. But though she denied parking it there, Melanie later claimed that she had gone to Atlantic City and moved the car to mess with him. Bill had a gambling problem, Melanie explained. And after their fight, she knew he would be at the casino, so she drove around until she found his car and then moved it as a prank. It sounds beyond ridiculous, sitting here saying it, and I acknowledge that it's the truth, she stated. Investigators, however, found it highly suspicious that Melanie had then tried to have 90-cent Easy Pass toll charges, which proved she'd gone to Atlantic City, removed from her account. "I panicked," Melanie stated. "I absolutely tried to have those charges taken off because I feared that people would look and think what they ultimately ended up thinking." Meanwhile, investigators found more and more evidence that suggested that Melanie McGuire had killed her husband. Bill's car contained a bottle of chloral hydrate, a sedative, and 2 syringes, which had been prescribed by Bradley Miller. Miller, however, claimed that the prescription was written in Melanie's handwriting. Police also found a number of suspicious internet searches on the McGuire's home computer, including questions like how to purchase guns illegally, how to commit murder, and undetectable poisons. And they believed that the garbage bags in the McGuire home matched the bags wrapped around Bill McGuire's dismembered body. On June 5, 2005, investigators arrested Melanie McGuire and charged her with first-degree murder. Dubbed the Suitcase Killer, she was found guilty and sentenced to life in prison on July 19, 2007, at the age of 34. But Melanie maintains that she did not commit the infamous suitcase murder. And she's not the only one who thinks that police arrested the wrong suspect. In September 2020, Melanie McGuire gave her first interview in 13 years. During her conversation with Amy Robach, Melanie continued to insist on her innocence. "The killer is out there, and it's not me," Melanie told Robach. She suggested that her husband had been killed over his gambling debts, claiming that he was the one who'd insisted that she buy a gun in the first place. "After all these years, I still feel hurt," Melanie said. "I still feel bothered. Like, how could somebody think that I did that?" Melanie's not the only person who believes that the police got it wrong. Fairleigh Dickinson University criminology professors Megan Sachs and Amy Schlossberg have an entire podcast called Direct Appeal, dedicated to questioning Melanie's conviction. "She didn't fit the profile, I guess, of a murderer," Schlossberg stated. Sachs seconded her co-host, saying, "Melanie did not incapacitate, shoot, or use a saw to dismember her husband. Do you know how hard it is to cut through bone? It is physically exhausting. Also, if the crime scene didn't happen at the family home, and she's home with her children all night, where is this happening? There are just too many holes in this story." Guilty or not, Melanie McGuire, the so-called suitcase killer, remains an object of fascination. Lifetime released a movie about her case, Suitcase Killer: The Melanie McGuire Story, in 2022. But though both the podcast and the making of the movie have brought attention to the suitcase murder, it doesn't change the fact that Melanie McGuire is behind bars. To this day, Melanie maintains that she did not kill her husband, dismember him, and dispose of his body parts in suitcases. "There were times I wanted him gone," she stated. But gone doesn't mean dead. What do you guys think? Do you believe her or think she actually did it? In 2011, a self-published author named Nancy Brophy wrote an essay titled How to Murder Your Husband. 7 years later, she did just that. Daniel and Nancy Brophy had been married for 25 years when Nancy walked into a kitchen at Oregon Culinary Institute, where Daniel worked as an instructor, and shot him twice. The two had been struggling financially, and prosecutors argued that Nancy wanted to cash in on Daniel's substantial life insurance policies. Nancy denied any involvement in Daniel's death, claiming that she'd been at home in bed when he was killed. However, investigators in the case uncovered more and more evidence that pointed to Nancy, and they ultimately charged her with his murder. In 2022, Nancy Brophy was convicted of second-degree murder and sentenced to life in prison for killing her husband. Here's how the romance novelist's murderous fantasies went from fiction to reality. On the morning of June 2, 2018, students at Oregon Culinary Institute arrived for class to find their 63-year-old instructor, Daniel Brophy, dead from 2 gunshot wounds. His death was immediately investigated as a homicide. But it wasn't for another 3 months that police turned their attention to their primary suspect, his wife, Nancy Crampton Brophy. Traffic camera footage showed Nancy's minivan arriving at the Institute during the 13-minute window in which Daniel Brophy was murdered. She claimed to have no memory of the drive, blaming retrograde amnesia from the trauma of finding out her husband had died. A day after Daniel's death, Nancy Brophy took to Facebook where she expressed her grief. She described her husband as her best friend and wrote that she was struggling to make sense of everything right now. "While I appreciate all of your loving responses, I am overwhelmed," the Facebook post read. "Please save phone calls for a few days until I can function." But Don McConnell, a neighbor of 6 years, stated that Nancy Brophy didn't have what he would consider a normal reaction to her husband's death. "She never showed any signs of being upset or sad," said McConnell. "I would say she had an air of relief, like it was almost a godsend." McConnell also recalled discussing the murder with Nancy and asking if the police had been in touch with her. She said, "No, I'm a suspect," stated McConnell, adding that she appeared to be unfazed and emotionless when giving her response. All the while, investigators were indeed slowly but steadily building a case against Nancy Brophy. As the police began looking into Daniel's murder, they came across some suspicious evidence against Nancy that they just couldn't look past. First, investigators determined from Nancy's internet search history that she had been researching untraceable ghost guns prior to the murder. Despite the fact that she and Daniel were struggling financially, she spent $15,000 on guns and gun parts in the year before his death. This included a kit for a ghost gun that was delivered in January 2018 but was never built. The following month, she bought a Glock handgun barrel on eBay. Then, she searched online for cleaning a Glock 17 and loading a 9mm Glock and watched videos on assembling, disassembling, and cleaning a Glock 17. While the gun used in Daniel Brophy's murder was never found, it was determined the bullets did, in fact, come from a Glock 17 handgun. Investigators believe Nancy mixed and matched the parts, attaching the barrel she purchased from eBay to another Glock 17 she purchased at a gun show, and then switching them back after the murder. It's not totally out of the norm to look up a Glock 17 purchase. But when you break it down to a barrel and slide, well, that's a little more interesting, said former Portland Police Bureau officer Aaron Sparling, who was tasked with analysis of digital evidence in the case. Nancy Brophy was arrested on September 6, 2018, and charged with the murder of her husband. Nancy Brophy's trial began nearly 4 years later, in April 2022. The prosecution's case was largely circumstantial, relying almost entirely on the traffic camera footage and her internet search history. This case wasn't built around photographs and text messages. It was built entirely around internet evidence, said Sparling. It's all search history. I can't recall a single other case in my tenure that was built off of internet-related evidence. And despite the ironic and aptly named How to Murder Your Husband essay penned by Nancy Brophy, the judge ultimately excluded the piece from being used as evidence in the trial, largely due to the essay having been written 7 years before Daniel Brophy's murder. Any minimal probative value of an article written that long ago is substantially outweighed by the danger of unfair prejudice and confusion of the issues, Judge Christopher Ramrah said. Nancy's 700-word essay outlined possible motives for why someone would want to kill their husband, listing examples like adultery, domestic violence, and greed. Brophy wrote, "As a romantic suspense writer, I spend a lot of time thinking about murder and, consequently, about police procedure. After all, if the murder is supposed to set me free, I certainly don't want to spend any time in jail. I find it is easier to wish people dead than to actually kill them. I don't want to worry about blood and brains splattered on my walls. And really, I'm not good at remembering lies." But the thing I know about murder is that every one of us has it in him / her when pushed far enough. Prosecutors argued that Nancy's motive was money, claiming she stood to benefit from several life insurance policies taken out on her husband that totaled around $1.4 million. Just a few days after Daniel Brophy's murder, Nancy reportedly asked police for an official statement saying that she was not a suspect so she could collect on the policies. "She had the plan in place," said Sean Overstreet, a deputy district attorney during the trial's closing arguments. "She had the opportunity to carry out this murder. She was the only person who had the motive." After 7 weeks on trial and 2 days of deliberations, Nancy Brophy was found guilty of murdering her husband. She was sentenced to life in prison. "We've all been waiting 3.5, almost 4 years now to start grieving this loss," said Nathaniel Stillwater, Daniel's son from a previous marriage, in an interview. "To finally have some closure has been very important and meaningful for our family, and we feel that we can start to move on and remember my father always, but begin that process of starting to grieve." If you enjoyed the video, please show your support by subscribing and liking the video, and turn on all notifications so you don't miss any future uploads.